In the quiet hours of the night, when your breathing begins to slow and the world outside fades into a gentle distance, imagine a small island resting in the eastern Aegean Sea, shaped by wind, stone, and time. An island where clocks seem unnecessary and where the people speak of age not as a burden, but as a companion. And this island is called Ikaria, named after the myth of Icarus, who once fell from the sky nearby. Yet unlike his brief and tragic descent, life here stretches softly forward, unhurried and enduring, as if the land itself has learned how to hold onto moments longer than the rest of the world. And to understand Ikaria is not to search for a single secret, but to slowly walk its winding paths, to listen rather than measure, because for thousands of years this island has existed slightly out of step with history, shielded by steep mountains and rough seas that once discouraged invaders, and even today keep mass tourism at a polite distance. And in ancient times, Ikaria was poor, often overlooked by empires, passed between powers like a forgotten stone, first by the Ionians, then the Romans, the Byzantines, the Ottomans, and briefly by modern states that rarely invested much in its development. Yet this isolation became a kind of gift, preserving habits that elsewhere were erased by speed and ambition. And when modern researchers eventually arrived in the late 20th century, armed with statistics and medical curiosity, they noticed something extraordinary: that Ikaria had one of the highest percentages of people living into their 90s and beyond, with remarkably low rates of dementia, heart disease, and depression. And this discovery placed the island among the world's so-called blue zones, alongside Okinawa, Sardinia, Niger, and Loma Linda. But numbers alone could never explain the feeling of Ikaria, because longevity here does not feel like a scientific achievement, but rather a side effect of a life gently lived, where mornings begin without alarms, afternoons stretch into conversations under fig trees, and evenings end with simple meals and shared stories. And if you were to walk through an Ikaria village at dusk, you would hear the low murmur of voices, the soft clink of glasses filled with local wine, the sound of the wind moving through olive branches older than any living resident. And these olives, along with wild greens, beans, lentils, goat milk, honey, and herbal teas made from rosemary, sage, and mountain herbs, form the backbone of the Ikaria diet, not because it was designed for health, but because it was all that grew well in the rocky soil. And necessity shaped nutrition long before modern labels like Mediterranean diet existed. And people ate what the land offered, slowly, socially, and without excess. Meals were not rushed, and eating alone was considered unusual. Food was conversation, and conversation was medicine. And even wine, often diluted with water as an ancient Greek tradition, was taken not for escape, but for connection. And beyond food, there's the rhythm of movement, not exercise as a scheduled task, but walking steep paths, tending small gardens, climbing hills to visit neighbors' movements. Woven naturally into the day, never extreme, never absent, and perhaps most quietly powerful of all, is the Ikaria relationship with time itself, because here being late is not considered rude. It is considered normal. Schedules bend, patience stretches, and stress struggles to find a place to settle. And when researchers asked elderly residents about retirement, many seemed confused by the question, because work in Ikaria was never a switch that turned off. It simply transformed. Older people continued to contribute in ways that felt meaningful, watching children, sharing knowledge, preparing food, offering advice, and this sense of purpose, subtle yet constant, anchored them to the present and history to left its marks because Ikaria was. Once a place of exile, during the 20th century, political prisoners were sent here, and the locals, though poor themselves, shared what little they had, creating bonds that turned strangers into family, reinforcing a culture where community was survival, not ideology. And even further back, during pirate raids in the medieval period, Icarians learned to hide their villages inland, invisible from the sea, developing a habit of discretion and inward focus. And these lessons passed quietly through generations, shaping a people who valued safety, trust, and closeness over display. And as the night deepens and your thoughts slow, it becomes clear that Ikaria's secret is not hidden in a single herb or habit, but in the absence of constant urgency. In a life where sleep is respected, naps are common, nights are dark and quiet, and the human body is allowed to follow its natural signals. And perhaps that is why dementia is rare here, because minds are not constantly pulled in opposing directions. And when death does come, it is met without panic. Funerals are simple, grief is shared, and memory is carried forward in stories rather than fear. And standing on a hill above the sea, watching the horizon dissolve into darkness, you might feel that Ikaria does not resist aging. It simply does not fight time. It walks beside it, step by step, breath by breath, allowing life to unfold at its own ancient pace. And as you drift closer to sleep, imagine yourself there, breathing the salt air, feeling the stone beneath your feet still warm from the day, listening to distant laughter fade into the night, and understanding perhaps for the first time that growing old does not have to mean growing tired of life. And on this quiet island where no one seems to hurry, time itself learns to slow down with you.